Hi, everyone. This is Laura Mazzullo, the host of Practitioner Corner. I am joined today by Liz Mattila, and I'm so excited to have you here, Liz. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be talking to you.
For those who don't know Liz, she is head of people, chief people officer, whatever we want to title you. You'll be starting a new job by the time we air this. And that's very exciting. I
It
wanted to give the
is.
I wanted to give our audience a sense, Liz, of how we know each other, because I think we are both good examples of the power of community and staying in touch. So, can you bring everyone back in
I
time?
mean, and the funny thing is, we have to go like way back, right? Because I think we first met 15 years ago at least, if not even a smidge more. But it was back in the day when recruiters used to go to people's offices and everybody was in the office every day. And I
Yeah.
remember that you were a recruiter that we met at the company where I was at the time. And, just somebody who we would consider using if we needed to outsource a specific role. And we have just stayed in touch ever since then. And it's been many years. But I mean, it's really nice that we're connected on LinkedIn too, but we've just always stayed in touch. And as a matter of fact, when I had an opportunity to be looking for a new role, you're literally one of the very first people I thought of to connect with after all these years.
And how lucky we were that a week later I got a new search that
There
you
you
would be
go.
starting.
Serendipity.
It is. I think so much of recruiting is serendipitous. And you're right. In those days we did what was called client meetings where you would go. Um, Ideally they wanted us to go twice a week, which was always very hard to get, but twice a week to a
Wow.
new client that you've never met with and just talk about the business. And so I met with you and you're right. I think we both just put a really good intentional effort into staying in touch and checking in and just talking shop and never having it feel transactional, Liz, but rather just getting to know each other.
Yep. Yeah, for
And I
sure.
think that's really important. I think in our space, sometimes it's a little bit of a lost art. People often say to me, "Oh, I forget to talk to recruiters or I forget to talk to my peers because I don't need something." And I'm like, well, do it even when you don't need something.
For sure. Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. I mean, that's the time to keep in touch with people because otherwise, it can, and I get this, but like if you only keep in touch with people when you need something, it's a little bit of a turnoff. Like, oh, sure, now you need something, you're in touch with me. But that wasn't the case with us because it's like we've been in touch for all these years. And it's really nice to have a robust network that you don't let get stale, right? You
Yeah.
want people to feel like it's not wildly weird that suddenly they're hearing from me or hearing from you or whomever, with your network. It's just nice to check in once in a while and see how people are doing. And it's really, when you think about it, it doesn't actually require that much work to keep your network fresh, but it does require a little bit of proactive effort.
Yeah, you're right. Not anymore. Now we can just send a text or an email or an article we
Right.
see or a TikTok
Yeah.
video we liked or whatever it is. It's
Yeah,
takes 2 seconds, but it's the intention behind it.
for sure.
Um,
Yep.
so I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about because I know our listeners really like when we get past the surface and talk about what we're really thinking about. And a question that was asked of me years ago that I loved was, what keeps you up at night when you think about HR or in my world, talent acquisition? And I like the caveat that, of course, hopefully none of us are losing sleep over work. It is just work. We, obviously want balance, but I like the
Hopefully not.
framing because, yeah, I like the framing because I do think there are things on our minds that we're probably not voicing enough about whatever's going on in the world of work right now. And we're in 2026 and things are evolving quickly. And so I want to throw the baton to you and ask you, Liz, what do you think's been keeping you up at night about HR?
You know what I've been thinking about a lot, and I think it's the fact that you and I have reconnected on a more really active way just recently. But it kind of got me thinking about the personal touch. And I know everybody is talking AI, and what it can do for you, and all the positive benefits for sure. But for me, what I have been thinking about is where and how are we losing sight of the personal touch? because I feel like even with AI and AI in recruitment, and I know you can certainly speak more to that, but I feel like, the AI will look at keywords, and it will go through the hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes that recruiters get for any open search, and it will accept or reject those resumes based on these targeted keywords. But sometimes, it's really the personal touch that makes a difference between a good candidate and a great candidate. And I worry that that kind of active discussion and like really talking in that type of way between client and recruiter, it feels a little bit like it's getting lost. And I worry about that because it doesn't seem right to me that AI essentially is playing such an active role in making recruitment decisions and decisions around people's careers. And I don't know, that is one thing that I've been thinking about quite a lot lately.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I've been having this conversation with a number of people, and you're not alone in that thought, which is that AI is supposed to be making our lives easier at work, both, as you say, with the hiring process and of course with the employee experience. And all of that is great, and it should be freeing up time for HR pros to be more strategic and for talent acquisition pros to be more strategic. But on the flip side, you actually need more human-led HR and TA pros, right? So the personal touch, I guess, unfortunately, is something that has to be like examined with the people doing the work. And so,
Yeah.
like, what I'm noticing is there's a gap with like we're training HR pros on AI, or we're training internal recruiters on their technology to make their lives easier. But maybe we're forgetting to train them on empathy and compassion and decision making and some of the, quote, soft skills, end quote here. Just, I agree with you that we've lost it a little bit, or we haven't addressed it enough.
Yeah, I think that maybe I mean, I hope it's the latter. I'm hoping that as people, as it kind of strikes people like, geez, wait a minute, how are we doing things now? Kind of taking a step back and thinking about process and the way that people are recruiting or addressing talent development or whatever it might be within the HR realm. I'm hoping that people will go, well, maybe we really do need to think about that personal touch. And one thing that I was thinking about specifically was when I've had conversations with recruiters about roles, you kind of like you put the job description together and here's the role and here's about the organization, and then you kind of list, what are the qualifications and what will the person be doing. But in a way, sometimes it really is just like a list. Here's my list of qualifications. But to me, the meaningful dialogue with a recruiter is like, well, let's talk about prioritizing what you really, really need for this role. And what about if there's something that a person doesn't have? How much weight are we going to put on that? Is
Yeah,
it okay? Is it trainable? Is it teachable? Is this really something that's a must have? Or is it a must have, but you can teach someone in this other skill that they need? They have to be a visionary, for instance. That's not necessarily teachable, or at least it's not
right.
like, it's something that you acquire over years of experience. But having that conversation has been so, so valuable in my past, and kind of bringing forth a little bit of these aha moments like, you're right. Maybe I'm placing too much emphasis on this thing, and I'm insisting that the candidate has it, but you've got me a great candidate who doesn't have it. And yet it's a very easily teachable skill. So I should maybe reframe my expectations that way. I feel like that's the kind of thing that has been so valuable in my past. And I worry about that being, it's not replaceable using AI, or at least maybe not yet.
Yeah, yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking like how do you teach someone personal touch? How do you implement that in action?
Mm. Yeah,
Is
it's a
it,
good question. It
yeah,
is a good question. And where, I guess the other thing too is kind of examining, what sort of an organization do you want to be? What kind of value do you place on that? If it's a really high market value, then where do you bring it in? It's a really, really good question. Where do you bring in that personal touch? Maybe, maybe you're okay with having AI do the first screening. It's tough out there. I get it. There's so many resumes that come in. But maybe what you want to focus on is your talent development and having more, personal teaching methods rather than just like, hey, you know, look at this, watch this
Yeah.
video.
Yeah.
Um, but I
I
kind of just think it depends on the type of organization that folks want to have.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about it in terms of learning and development too. So it's cool that you just brought that up because I've been feeling like we, I don't remember when, I guess a decade ago, everybody was talking about going away from just watching those videos and making it
Yeah,
more coaching and more
right.
personalized and one-on-one. And I'd have clients calling me like, can you work one-on-one with our internal recruiter and up level them? And I was getting such fun projects in that arena. And then the last like I don't know, maybe since COVID, the last 3, 4 years, I felt like there was, unfortunately, the pendulum kind of back to like, we want bite-sized, easy, digestible
Mhm.
information people can do on their, whatever on demand. And I thought, I think we're losing something though, because I think to your point, if we want a more human-led experience for either candidates or employees or both, we need to make sure that we're training employees like in a more thoughtful way.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing that I'm thinking about too is what types of candidates are you trying to attract? Are you like a young, um, sort of entrepreneurial startup where you're sort of flying by the seat of your pants, and that might attract a certain type of worker versus like a more mature, organization that, excuse me, has been around for a long time and they know where they're going and they, have kind of a culture built in that they want to maintain, and that attracts a different type of worker. So I think that's the other thing too, is what type of worker are you trying to attract and what is appealing to the Gen Zers who are coming into the workforce now.
Yeah, I think we're still figuring it out as we go.
I mean, it's interesting when you hear about schools, for instance, who have made the decision to take away phones from the classrooms. And at
Mhm.
first, it was like this hue and cry, like, "Oh my gosh, that's just terrible. No phones in the classroom." But actually, I have heard from interviews with students and interviews with teachers that their social skills have accelerated much more quickly. They are having in person, social conversations with their friends versus just like texting somebody who's sitting right next to you.
Yeah, yeah,
So, I mean, I think it's positive, but I do think um, it's just things are really evolving and changing so much that it's sometimes hard to anticipate what's right around the corner and what do we want to be, like what should we be thinking about and focusing on?
yeah. And sometimes what I found in HR with evolution is like there's so much time wasted in iteration and planning and like by the time they've built these bite-sized training videos, we're no longer wanting them. It's like actually
Yeah,
now we want to go back to your point, like put the phones down, let's do classroom, seminars again. Let's have people have a lunch and learn again. How much did we all love
yeah,
those a decade ago? So it's like
yeah. I used to love
it's
lunch
an
and
odd
learn.
thing. Yeah, same. So I wonder, it's like sometimes I think we're trying so hard to modernize that we're, to your point, maybe we're losing sight a little bit of like, wait a minute, a lunch and learn with 10 people once a month might be more beneficial than a very high tech training video program.
It's
Um,
funny because when I was working at Environmental Defense Fund, which was the organization I was at before my next opportunity that I'm going to start, I remember very clearly we had this gentleman who had been with the organization a long time, and he was an incredibly interesting energy specialist. Like he talked about all types of energy, fossil fuels, wind, solar. And it was just absolutely fascinating to hear him and to hear him talking about that. And again, it was a brown bag lunch. And I remember that at the time I was new to the organization. I really didn't know that much about, um, you know, climate effects and warming and all that kind of stuff, and I wasn't very savvy in the way of energy and how to think about energy and new ways of finding it and utilizing it, and that stuck with me. And honestly, that was probably like 7 years ago, and that still is in my mind about
Yeah.
what a meaningful experience that was.
Yeah. There's something to be said, as you're saying, for the human touch, for like
Yeah,
a shared communal experience. And
right.
maybe we've leaned so heavily on tech that we kind of need that pendulum to swing back a little bit.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I tech is great, and it sure does help with, like getting work done quickly. And um, like I absolutely love Slack, for instance. I'm a huge Slacker. I really love that program. And it's just so nice to send somebody a quick message and get an answer, get a question answered. It's kind of like the old pop in when everybody was in the office and you stuck your head in somebody's office and just
Yeah.
said, "Hey, do you have a second? I have a quick question." I like Slack for that very reason, particularly because so many workforces and people in workforces are now all over the globe and all over the country, and you can get somebody really quickly and get questions answered. And so that's just one small example. I just happen to really like it. So tech helps in many ways, but there's also the side where it's still kind of evolving, like how are we going to use this technology. And of course, circling back to AI, I do think that it comes up a lot. I mean, I feel like every conference that I go to or roundtable or, any of that, it's always like, let's get together, HR people, and talk about AI.
I know. And
And
we're not
it's a
talking about
little
the
bit like
personal touch. Yeah.
there's a slight hamster wheel going on because I feel like we sort of talk about the same thing. But it's evolving so much that nobody really has the definitive answers yet.
Yeah, I think it's one of these both can be true kind of cognitive dissonance. Your brain can allow two opposing thoughts. This is like Psych 101 here, but I think we have to think this way that yes, AI is incredibly helpful and all the HR technology programs that are coming up are just amazing and some of them are going to be groundbreaking. And, that end, to your point, we really don't want to lose the human experience at work and probably need to consider how we're up leveling our peers in HR and TA so that they're not losing that. And maybe some of them were never trained on that. And so both, right? It's like the people just coming into the HR world need to be taught how to bring emotional intelligence and bring good communication. And then maybe the people who've been in the field 20 plus years still need refreshers on that. But
Yeah,
we're
for
ignoring
sure.
it. I think you're right. We're not really talking about it. So I'm glad we're talking about it here. It feels like it's been kind of forgotten.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you make a lot of valid points. Like accept both things at the same time. I think that's really true. And I know that there is fear and certainly real fear with what roles AI will replace. But at the same time, it also does bring a lot of opportunities, and I do think that kind of to your point, like accepting HI, but then also like folding in that human touch, I really kind of feel like maybe that's where we'll ultimately be landing. And we just have to kind of figure out what that looks like.
Right.
But,
I love that.
yeah, but it's still nice to like talk to people and have, engaging discussions and dialogue and think about opposing viewpoints and really just think about people's ideas and just be able to have a conversation about that. I find that very stimulating, rewarding, learning. And so there's a big place for us to remember about
Yeah.
just engaging people.
Well, and I think what I'm hearing too is so like I'm so sick of the word strategic, right? But I also think it's the easiest word to use for what we want to
Yeah.
say here, which is that obviously I shouldn't say obviously, but my assumption is that AI will remove a lot of the transactional, tactical, administrative work in our jobs. And that's a
Hmm.
good thing, right? I don't want to spend 16 hours sourcing and you don't want to spend 16 hours building an employee training program. So great, take out some of the grunt work, so to speak. But I think
Yeah.
what that
Yep.
does is it frees up our strategy minds and ideally will free up that ability to be influencing and guiding and pushing back. And so like I'm thinking of the question I asked you, like how do you teach personal touch? And I don't have the answer. I think the listener should also reflect on that. But I do think we can at least just start with our own jobs. Like, where can we be more human and where can we be a little more fearless? Maybe we do have to give the CEO some tough feedback or push back on something or educate on something. And I think our space in general historically has work to do with that kind of bravery too.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And also, I'd be really curious to hear people say where they feel like they'd like more human touch. Like maybe they're absolutely
Yes,
fine with, knowing that AI is going to screen out many, many resumes, and that's just like where we are. It's kind of like when you call a place nowadays, you sort of expect that you're going to get an automated, press one for this and two for that kind of thing. It's just so common nowadays. It's almost a surprise when somebody actually answers a phone.
right,
um,
right.
but so I feel like it would be interesting to hear where people would say, where employees would say, I'm fine with AI with some things, but gosh, I would really love it to have more of a personal touch for this thing.
I love
um, I,
that.
I
Yeah.
think that would be a great conversation to have and really learn from employees, because one can always make a guess or an assumption, like here's where we might want to think about the personal touch. But I would want to I wouldn't want to just
You want data. I
assume.
agree.
What happens when you assume? So you have
No,
to
it's
hear from the
true.
people.
It's true. And I am always kind of figuring that out with each and every search I work on, how much my clients want my feedback or my guidance and where they don't. And you're right, it's a lot of asking questions. What data points do you want me to capture and how much influence do you want and how much of my feedback do you want? Because it's a fine line of, as we know, being a true business partner, it's letting the other party flounder a little bit, letting them find their footing. You don't want to do everything for them and you also want to make sure that they're learning. So I think it's a delicate dance that we're all trying to navigate right now.
Yeah. And it's funny because I just got an article from Dave Ulrich, um, who was talking about, he does like a frequent newsletter. And one thing he said recently is that anticipate and engage with targeted customers. He says we create a link with HR and staffing, training, rewards, etc. We create a link inside the organization, and that link should be linked to customer and investor value. He says we create this by asking that for each HR process. HR processes should be done in such a way so that customers, employees, engage more with the organization. And I really
Right.
like that. We
Yeah.
want our employees to be really engaged and in touch and feel proud of the organization where they are and feel like they have a place there.
Yeah. I mean, I think for years we've tried to have that conversation that an employee experience should look like a customer experience, but not many
Yeah.
people have taken action. It's nice to have some tangible ways to do that. And
Hmm.
that's really smart. I wanted
Yeah.
to kind of end on a fun note because I know you and I both love reading and we love, well, you just quoted an article that you've read and we love being students of our craft. So
We
what's
do.
a quote? Like, do you have a quote or two or a quote on your desk or a catchphrase? Like, I'm curious if you have something you'd want to share with our listeners about that you just that I don't know, thought-provoking quote you like.
Well, it's an old one, but I feel like it's an oldie but a goodie. It is one. It was something that came from. I had seen it. I mean, really years and years and years ago, and it just really stuck with me. And I try to remember that. And it was a quote from, and I forgive me, I don't remember what the Native American tribe was, but it was never judge a man until you've walked a mile in his moccasins. And I
Mm,
really love that because I just feel like, yeah, you just don't know what people are going through, what their personal experiences have been, what their history is, how they might relate to something because of what their, what's in their past and what has shaped their thought process. So for some reason, I really love that one. I know
yeah.
it's pretty common, but I like it a lot.
No, I like it too. And I think I think judgment is something that we talk about in HR and probably not nearly enough, but how, we all have our own biases and personality quirks and past traumas and past, family dynamics and
For
relationship
sure.
dynamics and work
Yeah.
traumas. And we sort of forget that all of that shows up at the office. And
Yeah.
like it's a great reminder to think about, you're judging this person in the boardroom without realizing like that's a little child there. That's a person who has insecurities and has an ego and
Mhm.
has fear. And it's a very humbling perspective because then you suddenly realize like, you're talking to someone who's complicated and layered as we all are.
And I think that I agree fully. I do think that it doesn't mean like, okay, once you walked a mile in their moccasins, now you can judge them. It's certainly not saying
Right.
that, but it's just like really, take a moment and appreciate the fact that everybody has different experiences and their worlds are shaped differently from yours. So like, let's give everybody some grace.
Yeah, I know. Grace is such a good word for our field. It really is. Like,
It is.
and it doesn't even mean that you're excusing bad behavior, obviously. It means that you're you're
No.
you're observing it from a place of empathy first to just say, you know, I don't know, just pausing to observe it. What am I observing? What's happening here?
Well,
And
and to bring it into the modern times, it's a data point.
it
Like
is. It
let's
is.
use that as a way to help understand each other.
Yeah, and I'm glad that like we've been talking about empathy in the workplace for a long time, but it feels like we still need to be talking about it. And that's a great
Yeah.
reminder. Just, you're going to work, you're bringing energy to an office, metaphorically or actually, and just consider that. Consider what you're bringing, consider what other people are bringing, give grace to them if there's a bad day. And yeah, I love it. I agree with you 100%.
Thanks.
Well, it was
Thanks.
so much fun talking to you. I think we could do 100 more episodes, so I might have
Oh
to
my
have you
gosh.
back.
Has it been 30 minutes? I mean, this just flies by.
I know, can you believe it? But I think we hit on
Wow.
some really great points that people will, yeah, and I think, we're not the only ones having these thoughts, and so it's comforting for people to realize that, they're not alone.
Yeah, I agree. I
And
agree.
we'll
It's always
continue
nice to know that you've
sharing.
got company. Yep.
Yeah, we'll continue sharing what we keep learning and we'll stay curious. And thank you for being on here, Liz. It was a pleasure chatting with you as always.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.